downstairs and you see the whole thing being thrown into the truck altogether again. So it's not being, followed through.
I'll give you the example of Delhi. The Supreme Court passed an order saying you can't burn leaves. And invariably what is happening now is all the sweepers, they'll just collect the leaves and again dump them in the garbage bin. Instead of composting or recycling or using them, they're again making their way to the city dumps. What a waste.
It's hard.
Yes. Go ahead.
I just wanted to flag something you said earlier about how the water from rivers is being diverted to the cities.
Yes. Yes.
Prime example of that actually is this thing that Mr. Modi is really proud of, the waterfront in the Sabarmati.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
The Narmada Water Disputes Tribunal Award that says we were going to supply water to the Sabarmati. That water from the Narmada was meant for thirsty Kutch and thirsty.
Yes. And it didn't reach there. Yes. Yes.
No kind of triumph that you have the Sabarmati full of water now. Nobody questions it.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And everyone says, what's the way forward? I keep saying our most powerful, the power that we have is as voters and as consumers. These are the two ways that we can exercise some sort of green choices.
Is it possible to get a mic to that lady? Or
Yes.
Okay.
So I want to play the devil's advocate here because
please
you
do.
said the audience doesn't seem to have any. So one of the things that I have understood about nationalism, especially the topic today, is that as a nation, we, the so-called Greens, are not recognizing the aspirations of a majority of the Indians. The first aspiration being of urbanization. And that is one question that has come to me again and again. I do have a house in Lonavala, and I often am questioned whenever, because we are part of the green movement and we keep saying, no more concrete, this and that. And every time I get a question, would you be ready to move back and leave either your urban houses and go into the rural areas, which I'm not ready to. So for all my greenhood, I'm not ready to move into a rural area. And would others like me be ready not to have a house in Lonavala and just stick to one house, because the rich seem to be wanting 2, 3 houses, they are adding concrete. The poor who don't have a single house are unable to move into urban areas because the houses are so expensive.
Right.
And it is just a regular circle, all right. Because the middle class aspires to be the rich, the minute they have more money, they want a second house. So it's a vicious circle. One of the things that struck me at some point of time was that in China, to ensure that urban areas were not crowded, of course it's a communist country so they can have such a law, they made it compulsory for all senior citizens, once you stop working, you move out of the city, go into a rural area, because you are not productive anymore. We don't want to add more buildings into the city, so the productive people come into the city and take over your homes, which are regulated by the government. In India, even if this idea would be mooted, it would be howled down by the so-called freedom movement. But again, look at it environmentally, it would make sense. So what do you have to say to that?
You've covered a range of things, but just, I think the problem is our models of aspiration, A, and B, why is our concept of environmentalism as going back to something? Why can't we have cities which make more sense? Why can't we have cities which are better planned? Why can't we have cities which, and I can give you examples from other parts of the world, whether it's Bogota or even in New York, they have tried models which are more eco-sensitive. Now you'd say, oh my God, New York, it looks like a gas-guzzling city, but there are examples, there are small examples where you can be in the city and you can still be. As for your concept of what you were talking about, aspiration, and the problem with the rural poor is, the rural poor I've spoken to, not all of them want to come to cities. They come to cities because of a lack of options in terms of access to jobs. Your cities provide, now, if we had, for instance, an NREGA, to my mind, that was a good example of providing employment locally. And you actually, I was told that there was, in fact, a shortage of migrant labor when NREGA, for the period it was being successfully implemented, because people didn't want to migrate to the cities, because they were getting employment locally. So I think we need to create those kind of models where people can get employment where they are. So, yeah. Okay.
See, examples that you're giving of the West. The West has already come to a position where it is so urbanized that it has lost most of its wildlife. If US, I mean, it's like, you know, giving these little candies as, you know, examples when actually the whole thing is lost. In US, they are down to some 1/30th of their groundwater level.
I agree, but I gave the example of Bogota.
Yeah, so
Bogota is not the West.
In fact, then your argument goes right into the face of the nationalist argument that then the nationalist will, I mean, the growth argument would be that you allow us to build like the US did, build roads everywhere, have industry
That's exactly
everywhere.
why I showed the Kuznets curve and said, no, it doesn't work.
So,
yeah.
But that's what you're saying. If looking at our population, if you were to give jobs, and now, as Mr. Modi says, we'll manufacture in India.
Yeah,
so if you're going to take manufacturing down to rural areas, even if you don't have manufacturing and you have only service industry, even then you would need electricity. I remember going to Toronto, and there a nuclear specialist said that they use 14,000 megawatts for Toronto alone.
No, okay, no, you're going into too many other issues
No,
now, but
I'm
let me come
saying
back.
it's eventually urbanization. All right, I was just playing the devil's advocate. Go ahead.
And there was a question by the gentleman in the blue shirt. I think he got tired and he stopped raising his hand.
Yeah.
Just to come back to the growth, the Intelligence Bureau at the back of some envelope said that 1 or 2% of the country's GDP is being lost because of all these environmental laws. Actually, they're completely wrong, because according to the World Bank, whose statistics we can sometimes accept, about 5 to 6% of India's GDP is being lost to this kind of growth. So as Dilip at the back said, it's the kind of growth, growth for whom? Is it everything that is infrastructure for whom? Is it 100 smart cities for whom? So I think, as Gandhiji said, always look to the needs of the last person. If we look to the needs of the last person, I don't think we'll be looking at 100 cities or industrial corridors or smart, fast trains and stuff like that.
Thank you, Daryl. I think you put that in a good perspective. And sorry, just to quickly add to that, we've got cyclones hitting our coast every week now. No one looks at the economic costs of that, for instance. And again, we're developing along our
there's been a couple of questions that's come in from Tata Steel's digital initiative in social media. There's one from a lady called Shobna Kumar, which says, though we know how important being pro-environment is in today's times, there's substantial evidence that it's not always cost-effective. With regard to industries where profit is an important objective, where must a company draw a line?
Oh, I wish this person was here for me to talk to. It's a very large generic question, but I would just, for instance, I would give the example of the Center for Science and Environment ratings, where they actually rate companies according to the resources that they use. And they actually work with companies to reduce their carbon footprint. So maybe for Tata Steel or whichever company this is, maybe they need to work more closely with environmentalists to reduce. Yes, we need steel. I'm not saying we don't need steel. We should go back to living in huts. How much steel do we need? How we are generating that steel, where we are generating that from. I think all that needs to be looked at.
There's just a couple more. I'll quickly
No,
ask
can
in
we
the
please,
short.
that gentleman's been
gentleman
raising
in
his
the
hand
blue
for the
shirt.
longest
All right,
time. Then we can come back to these.
From the European experience, there's been a great growth in the Green movement. Green Party is seen on so many ballot papers. What the Green Party has achieved wherever it's emerged is not necessarily electoral success, but where they have been successful is changing the agenda. And what has happened is that no mainstream party in any country in Europe can ignore the green issues any longer. And in fact, the progress the green movement makes is that it gets into coalitions, important coalitions in national government, state government, city government. So at all levels of the democratic process, there are people who have come to join a Green Party and make a change that way. I've not seen any indication of that idea appearing within South Asia. Yet it seems to me, as a European, looking on from outside, that maybe it would be quite a good idea.
Yes, I think that's a great idea. We need a Green Party. Maybe all of us in this room should start one. But no, I agree with you. We need a Green Party, and if we can't have a Green Party, then at least a group which is effective in implementing policies or forcing the government to implement policies which are more eco-friendly. But right now, us Greens are coming back to the subject, are being labeled as anti-national, so it's going to be a huge challenge. Yeah.
I think a lot of it is the rhetoric itself.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
There are groups in Europe that have been labeled as being terrorist, PETA being one, Greenpeace, of course, for a while got bad name. But even if we can't start a Green Party, I think there needs to be people like you using the type of rhetoric, hopefully, that counters this image. And I think the framing is far more critical than the activism itself.
That's true.
Actually, the rhetoric can be, it's really easy to counter, because if you read the IB report, it says, ludicrous things. Greenpeace gets donations from foreign parties, therefore it is anti-national. It's very, very stupidly nationalist in its framing. That's what it is. And that rhetoric can be pretty easily countered, once more of us speak out. Yeah.
We actually had someone on Twitter. Sorry. Yeah, now they do. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. We actually on Twitter, when we got attacked, we actually asked them to come here, and we never heard from them again. They didn't even write back.
It's framed as this very extreme thing. It's like, Bahar was asked on Twitter, oh, you want us all to live without ACs, you want us to live in huts. Everything is always black and white, when the reality is that most of it is gray, and there's so many shades of complexity in between. So